aiming to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. We begin tonight with a developing story in the South China Sea. The Philippine Coast Guard reported a collision between a Philippine vessel and a Chinese Coast Guard ship during a resupply mission. And we'll have more on this unfolding situation throughout this broadcast. President Marcos takes a firm stance. In the wake of this latest incident, we turn our focus to President Marcos's assertive approach towards China's actions in the South China Sea. During a recent Q&A session, the president emphasized his commitment to upholding the Philippines' constitution and national interests. Australia invests in Southeast Asia. Shifting gears now, Australia has announced a significant investment in Southeast Asia. Prime Minister Albanese unveiled plans to allocate $1.3 billion to boost trade partnerships in this growing economic region. And this announcement comes as leaders from the 10-nation ASEAN Forum gather in Melbourne for a summit. UN sounds the alarm on Myanmar's never-ending nightmare. The United Nations is calling for urgent action on Myanmar's devastating human rights crisis. The UN High Commissioner describes the situation as a never-ending nightmare and urges the international community to address the escalating conflict. In the latest maritime incident in the South China Sea, the Philippine Coast Guard reported a collision between one of its ships and a China Coast Guard vessel during a resupply mission to Filipino troops stationed on a remote outpost. Now, this collision occurred in the waters around Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands, an area where both countries have conflicting maritime claims.
There have been reports of a collision between BRP Sindangan and a Chinese Coast Guard vessel because of the illegal actions conducted by the CCG. Unaysa May 4 was also hit by water cannon.
The Chinese Coast Guard and other vessels undertook dangerous maneuvers and blocking, according to Philippine Coast Guard Commodore J. Tariela. The collision resulted in minor structural damage to the Philippine Coast Guard vessel, the BRP Sindangan, which was supporting a military rotation and resupply mission to Second Thomas Shoal, where Filipino troops are stationed on a grounded Philippine Navy vessel.
I would consider China a clear and present challenge to the Philippine Navy in the West Philippine Sea. The situation is not normal. It's not anymore normal. But we are up to the challenge. It is not normal because the Philippine Navy has been conducting maritime patrols in that area. And I mentioned last time that if you look at the historical context of it, from 1992, when they started erecting markers on our shoals, shallow waters, reefs, our features in the West Philippine Sea. In 1994, they prevented access to Ayungin Shoal, to Mischief Reef. In late 90s, they started erecting fishermen structures in Mischief Reef. In 2011, they started reclamation. Then they militarized the area. They declared an ADIS. So it is not anymore normal.
China's Coast Guard claimed to have taken control measures against what it deemed as the illegal intrusion of Philippine ships in waters around Rinai Reef in China's Nansha Islands. This incident comes amidst escalating tensions, with Philippine Foreign Minister Enrique Manalo urging China to stop harassing us, and Philippine President Marcos reiterating the country's firm stance on territorial integrity.
Simple explanation is if you would stop harassing us and perhaps performing other actions, there wouldn't be any news to report.
I will not allow any attempt by any foreign power to take even 1 square inch of our sovereign territory. The challenges that we face may be formidable, but equally formidable is our resolve.
Now, this collision marks the second such incident since December when Chinese ships engaged Philippine boats with water cannons. Analysts predict that tensions may further escalate, reflecting a shift in the Philippines' approach to maritime disputes under President Marcos compared to former President Duterte's policy of setting aside such conflicts in exchange for economic incentives from China. Now, pivoting from the maritime tensions in the South China Sea to broader global affairs, we turn our attention to President Marcos Jr.'s recent address at the Lowy Institute in Melbourne, Australia. In his speech, the president outlined the Philippines' stance on key international issues, offering insights into the nation's strategic cooperation with China and its commitment to upholding international law, particularly in the context of the South China Sea disputes. President Marcos began by emphasizing the strategic cooperation between China and the Philippines, emphasizing mutual respect and mutual benefit.
Centuries of friendship and kinship bind the Filipino and Chinese people. We pursue with the People's Republic of China comprehensive strategic cooperation founded on mutual respect and mutual benefit. Our independent foreign policy compels us to cooperate with them on matters where our interests align, to respectfully disagree on areas where our views differ, and to push back when our sworn principles, such as our sovereignty, our sovereign rights, and our jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea, are questioned or ignored.
However, President Marcos didn't shy away from addressing areas of contention, particularly concerning sovereignty and jurisdiction in the South China Sea.
In this specific context of the South China Sea, our interests are clear. They lie in ensuring that the universal and unified character of the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, and in the final and binding determinations of the South China Sea Arbitration Award of 2016 are firmly and consistently upheld. It is unfortunate that despite the clarity provided by international law, provocative, unilateral, and illegal actions continue to infringe upon our sovereignty, our sovereign rights, our jurisdictions. This pattern of aggression obstructs our path towards ASEAN's vision of the South China Sea as a sea of peace, stability, and of prosperity.
President Marcos also highlighted the Philippines' commitment to protecting its territory and maritime jurisdiction.
We shall never surrender even a square inch of our territory and our maritime jurisdiction. In this regard, we are upgrading the capabilities of our Coast Guard, pursuing the modernization of our armed forces, and earlier this year, I approved the updated acquisition plan of the armed forces of the Philippines called Re-Horizon 3, in line with our comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. Our forces must be able to guarantee, to the fullest extent possible, Filipino nationals, Philippine corporations, and those authorized by the Philippine government, unimpeded and peaceful exploration and exploitation of all natural resources in areas where we have jurisdiction, including and especially our exclusive economic zone, in accordance with international law.
Shifting focus to broader regional concerns, President Marcos addressed the existential impact of great power rivalries, particularly regarding nuclear disarmament. He emphasized the need for meaningful dialogue between major powers to maintain strategic stability and reduce nuclear risks in the Indo-Pacific region.
We, in the Indo-Pacific, cannot ignore the existential impact of great power rivalries upon the survival of our peoples and our communities. Amidst the alarming reversal of the historic trend of decreasing nuclear stockpiles in the region, we must remember that the tragic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons use were borne by peoples of this region, the hibakusha of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the victims of nuclear tests in the Pacific. It is time to bring Indo-Pacific issues to the fore of global conversations on nuclear disarmament. The People's Republic of China and the United States must engage in meaningful dialogue to maintain strategic stability and to limit any nuclear arms buildup. We in the Indo-Pacific must ensure that great powers do not treat the world as an arena for their competition. The pursuit of the great powers' respective strategic goals must never come at the expense of the interests of smaller states, nor of regional and international peace.
We now focus on President Marcos's assertive approach to countering Chinese actions in the South China Sea. President Marcos explained the significance of his stance during a Q&A session, highlighting his commitment to upholding the Constitution of the Philippines.
So I took an oath, and then in that oath, the oath is to support and defend the Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines. And the first article of our Constitution is the definition of our territory, maritime and otherwise. And these have been validated over very many years.
President Marcos elaborated on the historical validation of Philippine boundaries dating back to the Treaty of Paris after the Spanish-American War.
The original definition, actually, of our boundaries were laid out on the Treaty of Paris after the Spanish-American War. And since then, we have been that definition, if you want to call it that, has been validated by many actions by, for example, the United States, by UNCLOS, and the baselines agreement that we have had, and it has been recognized as the sovereign territory of the Philippines.
The president asserted that defending the territorial integrity of the country is not a matter of policy choice, but a duty he took on when assuming office.
And therefore, it was not, in my view, when I came into office, we simply have no choice. We must defend the territory of the Republic. And that is a primordial duty of a leader. And that's why we have taken a very strong position in that we cannot allow a unilateral decision made by some foreign capital far away to somehow amend or to change those definitions in terms of our territory.
And we now turn our attention to his stance on the country's strategic alignment and foreign relations. The president has also reaffirmed the country's commitment to acting in its own interests, particularly in matters of foreign policy. Speaking at the Lowy Institute in Melbourne, President Marcos also addressed concerns regarding the Philippines' perceived alignment with the United States in foreign policy decisions.
And I've always wanted to make it clear, because there is a narrative out there that is going around that we are at the beck and call practically of the United States when it comes to these foreign policy decisions, especially surrounding the South China Sea. But let me make it very, very clear. The Philippines acts for its own interests. And the decisions that we make when it comes to foreign policy are decisions that we make because we believe and are convinced and know that it is in the national interest. It is not a policy that has been foisted upon us by any country. It is something that we have come to on our own. It is a conclusion that we have arrived at by ourselves, and we have acted upon those conclusions that we have made.
Now, President Marcos was posed with a question concerning the rights and prerogatives of smaller countries in the region, particularly in the face of great power competition. The questioner emphasized the importance of active participation rather than passive observation in international relations. President Marcos stressed the interconnectedness of global events and their impact on nations, emphasizing the need for active engagement in international affairs. He also provided examples of how seemingly distant events, such as conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, have had far-reaching repercussions on economies and security worldwide.
Well, if we are talking about Asia, ASEAN, Indo-Pacific as well, I cannot think of an example where people are just standing idly by and watching events go on, evolve, without taking any action. Because the world being what it is now, so interconnected, it is impossible to find a global event or a national, international event, no matter where it is, that does not affect you, your country, your people. Just as a simple example, when Russia entered Ukraine, we in the Philippines were saying, well, that's not a good development, but it shouldn't affect us at all. It's very far away. We were quite mistaken thinking that, because within weeks, the effects of, for example, the fertilizer prices, the loss of the supply chains, the interruptions in the supply chains, suddenly our economies greatly suffered from that. Again, when the attack on October 7th of Hamas into Israel, again, you said, well, neither of them are oil producing, so it shouldn't bother the oil prices, which is something, of course, we all look at to see what the trends are. And we were once again mistaken, because yes, Gaza does not produce any oil, neither does Israel, but the implications of that increasing conflict has now hit all of us because of what's happening in the Red Sea, what's happening in the rest of the Middle East, what's happening between Iran and the United States. It would be foolish for any country to just be a passive observer. If we are to truly attend to the interests of our countries and our people, we must be engaged. We must be part of the discussion, and we must hopefully be part of the solution.
Now, during the conference, Prime Minister Lee, Singaporean Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong addressed inquiries regarding ASEAN nations' varying perspectives on the South China Sea. He acknowledged that differences exist due to geographical factors, noting that countries like Myanmar, facing the Indian Ocean, may not share the same direct stakes as those bordering the South China Sea, while Singapore itself does not have territorial claims in the South China Sea. The Prime Minister emphasized that all ASEAN nations have a vested interest in upholding the principle of freedom of navigation in the region. And here's further insights from the Prime Minister of Singapore.
ASEAN countries have a common position on the South China Sea, but we also have different national perspectives and, going beyond the ASEAN common position, different national positions. The national positions are different because our situations are different. Some ASEAN countries don't even have a littoral on the South China Sea. They do not face the South China Sea. For example, Myanmar. They are on the Indian Ocean, the Andaman Sea. Some ASEAN countries, like Singapore, do not have claims in the South China Sea. But we have an interest in freedom of navigation and the application of international law, including UNCLOS, on South China Sea issues, because it's a vital artery for international trade for us. Other countries, there are 4 ASEAN members who have claims, who are claimant states in the South China Sea, and these claims overlap with each other and overlap with claims by China. And so the positions we take on those claims are different depending on where we stand. And Singapore takes no position on the claims, but we have a strong view on international law and on freedom of navigation, which we have stated many times. You can look it up, and it has not changed. On the code of conduct, that's the common position of the ASEAN members, that we should negotiate a code of conduct on the South China Sea with China. The negotiations have been underway. They are taking some time. They have reached a point, I think, of a first complete read-through of the code of conduct. But to negotiate and to settle the code, I believe, will take some time. The issues are not easy to resolve, and really, negotiating a code of conduct inevitably raises issues of what the ultimate outcomes are going to be. And therefore, because the ultimate answers are difficult, so too negotiating the code will take quite some time.
A question was directed at Prime Minister Albanese of Australia concerning Australia's observation of the Philippines' actions in the South China Sea, alongside recent investments in the maritime security. Now, the query sought insights into China's potential perception of these initiatives and how Australia intends to navigate or balance its cooperation with ASEAN on bilateral concerns versus its bilateral relationship with China. Let's listen in.
Australia is a strong supporter of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, and we have strongly put our view that freedom of navigation through the South China Sea is important. A large percentage of Australian trade goes through that sea, whether it be on its way to China or to Japan or the Republic of Korea in particular. So it's an important waterway, and we support freedom of navigation. And we also support the application of international law. Our position on China remains very consistent, which is that we want to cooperate where we can, we'll disagree where we must, but we will always engage in our national interest. I think the recent progress has been made in the relationship. That is a good thing. It is always good when dialogue occurs, and that is our position that we'll continue to assert. ASEAN will continue to discuss the shared interests that we have in this region of maintaining a stable, secure and prosperous region.
Australia announced plans to bolster investment in Southeast Asia, allocating $1.3 billion to enhance trade in a region of growing economic influence.
As we meet to renew our commitment to ASEAN centrality, this forum is a celebration of ASEAN vitality. The dynamism and drive of business and workers and economies that, combined, will represent the fourth largest economy in the world by 2040. Your businesses are helping to generate that growth and that success. And the government that I lead has made it very clear. More than any other region, Southeast Asia is where Australia's future lies.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese unveiled the funding as leaders from the 10-nation ASEAN Forum convened in Melbourne for a 3-day summit.
I'm pleased today to announce our response to another key recommendation of the economic strategy, which is our decision to establish a $2 billion Southeast Asia investment financing facility managed by Export Finance Australia, demonstrating the value that Australia can add as an exporter of knowledge and a sharer of expertise. This builds on our infrastructure technical assistance in the region, particularly our Partnerships for Infrastructure program, where we are committing another $140 million. This will support ASEAN's efforts to improve infrastructure development, including early-stage project preparation, and accelerate regulatory reform in order to attract more diverse, quality infrastructure finance. The combination of these three initiatives from the economic strategy, the facility, Partnerships for Infrastructure and deal teams, will catalyse greater Australian private sector investment in Southeast Asia and vice versa. And
Albanese described it as the most significant upgrade of Australia's economic engagement with ASEAN.
We've had the most significant upgrade of Australia's economic engagement with Southeast Asia for a generation.
Climate change features prominently on the summit's agenda, with Southeast Asian nations grappling with energy demands primarily met by fossil fuels. Both Australia and ASEAN countries are eager to transition towards renewable energy, aligning with global efforts to combat climate change. In tonight's other news, the toll of Myanmar's human rights crisis continues to rise as armed conflict intensifies and spreads. UN High Commissioner Volker Turk sounded the alarm, urging for the situation in Myanmar to be referred to the International Criminal Court. In a compelling address to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Mr. Turk described the situation as a never-ending nightmare that remains largely unnoticed by the global community.
The human rights situation in Myanmar has morphed into a never-ending nightmare, away from the spotlight of global politics.
Over the past 3 years of military rule, the people of Myanmar have endured unimaginable suffering and cruelty. Military operations aimed at repression and destruction have resulted in countless civilian casualties and untold atrocities.
3 years of military operations designed to repress, terrify, dehumanize, and destroy. The subversion of the people's right freely to elect their civilian leaders, crackdowns on all forms of opposition and dissent, total abuse of power and impunity.
According to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, over 4,603 individuals have been killed by the military since February 2021, with many more likely unaccounted for. Turk condemned the brutal acts carried out against civilians, including burning individuals alive.
This is a chilling disregard for human life.
The recent escalation in violence triggered by coordinated attacks from ethnic armed groups has only exacerbated the suffering of the Myanmar people, and Turk expressed deep concern over the military's announcement of mandatory conscription, further undermining the rule of law.
In some places, the military has abducted individuals, while in others, they have threatened communities with burning their villages unless their young people are made to serve.
Reports of forced recruitment, including child recruitment, are on the rise, adding to the humanitarian crisis, and Turk highlighted the urgent need for the ICC, for the international community to act and protect civilians. Moreover, Turk emphasized the dire situation in Rakhine State, where the Rohingya population continues to suffer discrimination and violence.
I want to ring again the alarm bells about Rakhine State, which is engulfed even deeper in spiraling violence since November.
Turk is urging for concerted international efforts to prevent further atrocities and support the people of Myanmar in their quest for a better future. He reiterated the call for the situation in Myanmar to be referred to the International Criminal Court, or ICC, and stressed the need for targeted measures to prevent the military from perpetrating further harm.
For the last 3 years, people in Myanmar have sacrificed everything and kept alive their aspirations for a better and safer future. They need the entire international community to support them.
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.